Welcome to Yarra Junction, the gateway to the Yarra Ranges. What we're going to be talking about today are the timber tramways that were in all the forests and mountains just east of here and all through the Yarra Ranges. And one of the most famous of these is the Powelltown Tramway, and that's what we're going to be focusing on in today's video. Now you may think that Yarra Junction gets its name because it's the junction between two rivers, the Yarra River and the Little Yarra River. And it is true, the Little Yarra River, the confluence is in Yarra Junction, but this isn't actually where it gets its name from. It gets its name from the fact that this was the railway junction between the Powelltown Tramway and the main line between Melbourne and Warburton. Behind me is the reason why we've started in Yarra Junction. This is the old Yarra Junction railway station. The whole point of the Powelltown Tramway was to get mainly timber and also passengers and goods to Yarra Junction so that it could then be taken on the trains to get through to Melbourne and Warburton. This whole area just behind me was full of goods yards. It was quite large because you had to have different tracks for all the different types of wagons and locomotives, and there was also always activity here of people moving logs around, people boarding trains. It was a huge hive of activity, but as you can see now, it's all closed down, but the Yarra Junction station is now a museum. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And every subscriber means that I can get more stories about Melbourne and Victoria out to more people. So we're now going to leave Yarra Junction and head east down the Little Yarra Valley towards Powelltown. And after all that travelling, we are now here in Powelltown. The main reason I've stopped here is because it has this remnant log bogie just here in the middle of the car park. And this was actually reconstructed in 1980 using two original tracks that were found in the forest. The original sleepers had been rotten away because they were so old, so they had to rebuild them. But if you look closely at the log bogie, you can kind of see, well, actually forget the bogie for a second, look at the tracks. The tracks are quite, light, given that it was a light railway, and you can see how it was, it compares to a mainline railway. The gauge is very narrow. The construction, I guess, technique is not as durable as you'd expect on a main line, and that's because they had, they needed to keep costs down. They had a lot of these tramways to build, and honestly, they didn't expect them to last maybe beyond a few decades. They weren't running heavy trains along these things, so they could withstand. They didn't need to withstand those heavier loads. And so with all that, you end up with these tramways or light railways. And then the log bogie that you see here, they would put the logs on top of these, and then they would be drawn by locomotives along the tramways. While locomotives would haul things uphill, the job of getting the logs back down the mountains would be left to gravity. Basically, a worker would be stationed on the wagons carrying the logs and regulate the speed with a brake lever as they gradually wound their way to the bottom of the valley and the Powelltown mill. A locomotive would be attached at the back just to help them along the way if needed and push them along for the last little section. These cute little locomotives became sort of mascots for the area, earning nicknames like Coffee Pot and Squirt. They also helped make Powelltown unique among the many timber tramways in Victoria. Not only did they haul logs and goods traffic, but also carried passengers on regular timetabled services. While it didn't last for very long, it did provide an important link for people and businesses in the area before any kind of decent road was built through the rugged terrain. Now from here, we are going to go a little bit further into Powelltown to begin one of two walks that I'm planning to do today, and this is the Reid's Tramline walk. Reid's Tramline was built in 1920 and operated until 1930. It ran to Reid's Sawmill, a few kilometres north of Powelltown, which is where we're heading to now. So this tramway more or less followed Blackwood Creek, I think it is? Blackwood Creek, yes. When they were building a lot of these tramways, they tended to follow the watercourses because that would generally be at the bottom of a valley, and that would be the easiest place to build a tramway or a road if you were so inclined because of the topography. So we're still towards the beginning of the walk and I don't want to stop for very long around the creek, but I just found, where is it? There's a remnant here. Look, there is what looks like a set of bogies. Two wheels, probably with a replica piece of wood connecting them, but that's pretty cool. So the entire reason that the timber tramways existed was because of all the sawmills and logging that was going on up here. And they were here because they were looking for suitable wood for building things, not just buildings, but telegraph poles, railway sleepers, other supporting infrastructure. And to be honest, if you're looking for a tree for timber, can't do much better than the mountain ash trees back there. They're very tall, they're very straight, almost perfect, or perfect for timber really, which is why they came in the first place and why it's still such a prized area for timber today. So I'm going to shut up now for a bit and let you enjoy peace and quiet, the beautiful sights and sounds of the Victorian Alps. One of the biggest challenges for these sawmills was how to get the huge logs out of the dense and steep terrain and back to Melbourne. Building roads was out of the question. The mountains here are steep and rugged, and using horses, or the primitive trucks available at the time, would have made it impossible to get through the mud and wet ground in the temperate rainforest of this part of the world. Sealing or metalling roads was prohibitively expensive, so the answer here was narrow gauge steel tracks with small but highly flexible locomotives and rolling stock. Although effectively a light railway, these were called tramways. This distinction is important because anything called a railway at the time needed an Act of Parliament to authorise, so calling them tramways was a bit of a loophole to get around this. Tens of these tramways were built all across the state. These were not unique to Victoria, and many design decisions were based on previous experience in other places. This one I'm walking on now, Reid's Tramline, was one of many that branched off the main Powelltown Tramway in the valley and headed up into the hills directly to the sawmills. There are still many signs of its route, like this railway cutting here. So just here you can see on that side it's very clearly been dug through to avoid having to go around that way. It's incredible to think that, a train came through here. It was a light railway, a tramway, but still, you had a train with wagons, maybe some passengers thrown on the back as well. Imagine how fun that would have been, coming through here on a train. We've made it. We're now at Reid's Sawmill, or the site of Reid's Sawmill, with this handy sign that tells you it is the end of the walking track, and there are still a few bits and pieces here. There is this huge circular saw here, which presumably was used for cutting wood. There's another piece of metal here, don't quite know what it is, just there. Looks like this whole area was excavated. There would have been some sort of building here. This is where they would have cut the logs, this is where the mill would have been, and presumably the tramway would have come right up to the front here. So if you climb up a little bit past where we just were, ignore the sign that says end of walking track, because it's not strictly true. You will stand on top of a sawdust heap. And this was all the sawdust that was generated from the mill. There was no reason for them to take it with them, so it's still here. And there are more of these sawdust heaps scattered around the forest at all the mill sites apparently, but this is the one for Reid's mill. So that is Reid's Tramline and the Reid's Sawmill. We're now going to go back to Powelltown and walk along what's called the Walk Through History track, which follows part of the alignment of the Powelltown Tramway and actually takes you all the way through to Warburton. It takes 2 to 3 days of hiking to get there. And I don't have 2 to 3 days, so we're not going to do the whole thing. But I am going to walk a little bit of this track just east of Powelltown, and we'll see how far we get. So that's all for today. Make sure you join me in my part 2 video of this journey to Powelltown, which will be coming out soon. I'm very grateful to the Light Railway Research Society of Australia, and in particular to Mike McCarthy, Frank Stamford, Colin Harvey, Peter Evans and Brett Evans, who were all involved in creating the Powelltown Tramway Centenary pamphlet, from which I sourced a lot of the information for this video. It's an amazing resource that I've linked in the description below, as well as other work done by the Society. Thanks as always for watching, and a special thank you to all of my supporters. If you'd like to join them, head on over to supporters.philipmallis.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.